All right, looks like it's 11:45. Adriana, am I good to get started? Or whoever else is moderating?
Hi, Jamie. Yep, I'm just checking. Yeah, it's 11:45, and I think this is going to be very popular. So yes, please get started.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yep, we can.
All right, thank you. So I'm Jamie Eberl. I'm the MS4 Section Chief at DEP Central Office. In this presentation, I'll go over what to expect during an MS4 inspection and provide some tips for how you can prepare for your inspection. So the inspections are generally divided into three parts: the office inspection, the public works facility, and pollution reduction plan projects. I'll go into more detail about each part of the inspection later in this presentation, but just in general, during the inspection, your inspector will want to see all the documentation of all activities associated with the minimum control measures, see your public works facility or other municipally owned properties like parks or composting facilities, and see any implemented PRP BMP projects. So starting off with the office inspection. To prepare for your inspection, you'll want to review your MS4 permit and your most recent MS4 annual status reports. You want to have the documentation of permit required activities organized and ready for review. A lot of municipalities have a designated MS4 filing cabinet with a different drawer or folder for each MCM, so that everything is easily accessible in an order. Important to note that there's no surprise inspections, so you'll be notified in advance, so you'll have some time to get everything in order. That will make your inspection just go a lot smoother if you have all your documentation ready and waiting for the inspector. A little bit more detail on the office inspection. On the right side of this slide, you'll see the MCM1 section of the MS4 annual status report. So for MCM1 on the annual report, you're reporting that you have a written public education and outreach plan, a target audience list, that you're publishing stormwater education materials. So on the annual report, those are pretty much just kind of yes or no questions. But then during your inspection, the inspector is going to ask to see all of those items. So you'll want to have documentation. Yes, you have it, and here it is. You can take a look at it. So this slide has examples of the different types of documentation that could be asked for each MCM. Just note, this isn't all inclusive, but just kind of general examples of the types of documentation that you'll probably be asked for. For a comprehensive list of everything that you're expected to be documenting, that's in your permit. So you should definitely reference that, have that handy so you know everything that you could be asked for. So to go through this quickly, for MCM2, public involvement and participation, you'll want to show that you have a plan for public involvement, documentation that you've had your public meeting. That can be just your regular meeting notes, the highlighted section where you talked about MS4 activities. Anytime, excuse me. Anytime you have a public event or activities where the public's involved with your stormwater program, you want to have documentation of that involvement. So that can vary based on what the event is, but generally includes things like sign-in sheets to show who have attended the event, screen captures of Facebook posts about the event or newspaper articles, or even just a brief write-up about what was prevented, what the event was, and some photos. For MCM3, illicit discharge detection and elimination, the inspector will want to see your mapping and that it's being updated, copies of your outfall screening forms, documentation of any response to reports of illicit discharges, and copies of any educational outreach that you provided to citizens on illicit discharges. For MCM4, construction site stormwater runoff control, the inspector will want to see your ordinance that you do in fact require implementation and maintenance of ENS control BMPs. A lot of permittees work with their county conservation districts for this MCM. So if that's something that you're doing, your inspector will want to see a copy of your memorandum of understanding or your agreement with the conservation district. And it's important to point out for this one that if you are relying on the conservation district for assistance, it's still the municipality's ordinance to enforce. So your MS4 inspector will want to see that the municipality is working with a conservation district to ensure that construction sites are being inspected and any violations are being resolved. So even though it may be the conservation district that's taking the lead on those, there still needs to be some involvement. So, you can't just say conservation district handles that. We don't have any involvement. You still are expected to be somewhat involved because, like I said, it is the municipality's ordinance. For MCM5, post-construction stormwater management, the inspector will want to see your ordinance, again, that you require post-construction stormwater management for new and redevelopment projects and encourage the use of low-impact development. The inspector will want to see your inventory of post-construction BMPs, and again, importantly, see that it's being updated as new development projects are implemented. And they're going to ask how you're ensuring that those BMPs are being adequately maintained. If it doesn't say that the municipality isn't the one that has to maintain them, but you just have to ensure that they are being maintained. So if you have a method where you're working with homeowners and property owners to get inspection records, they'll want to know what your system is and see some documentation so that they know those BMPs are being maintained and still functioning. And lastly, MCM6, pollutant prevention, good housekeeping. The inspector is going to want to see your inventory of municipal facilities, operations, the written O&M program, and documentation on employee training. That includes who is being trained and what kind of training is being provided. So moving on to the field component of the inspection, this usually starts at the public works facility and may include other municipally owned facilities, just depending what you have on your inventory. The inspector is going to want to see a copy of the written O&M plan, see that it's being implemented. Those good housekeeping procedures identified within the plan are actually being implemented, and your plan isn't just a binder sitting in a corner somewhere. Some of the things the inspector may look for are disposal records for waste oil, other chemicals. Are spill kits readily available? Is everything being stored properly? Are containers labeled, stored inside, outside? Are they rusting? Are they leaking? Do staff working in the building know where their floor drains discharge to? Do they go to an oil water separator? Do they outfall to a stream? Are there salt storage facilities? Are another thing that your inspector is always going to want to see is salt being kept covered. You can see I have a picture here of salt that's not being covered, and every time it rains, it is just draining right to that inlet. So that's certainly something that they don't want to see. And lastly, for PRP projects, the inspector is going to ask about the status of your PRP BMP projects. So if you're in the planning stage, the inspector will want to see preliminary site drawings and talk about your plans for the BMP. Maybe go look at the site so you can explain what the plans are. Hopefully, during this time, a lot of people are going to have a pretty good start on implementing their PRP projects. So if you have BMPs that are implemented or currently under construction, the inspector will want to see plans or construction drawings for those and will want to go visit the BMP in the field. So depending on how many BMPs you have implemented, they may not, they're certainly going to want to see everything, but that's always doesn't necessarily work with the time frame. So they may not visit all the sites with you, but you should expect at least 1 or 2 site visits for BMPs. Kind of things that they're going to be looking for is the BMP that's implemented in the field, does that match what was on the design plans? Does it look like it's functioning? Does it look like it's being maintained? Is it overgrown? Is it full of trash? Is there sediment buildup? So you'll probably get some questions on how you maintain the BMP. How does it work? What kind of public education have you been doing? Any challenges that you're experiencing with the BMP, any plans to change it, anything like that. Last slide here, general tips to reiterate some of the stuff that I said earlier. Number 1, organized. The more organized you are, you have your documentation laid out ready for the inspector. That's going to make things go a lot more smoothly if everything's right there and you don't have to go hunting for it whatever the inspector asks for. Prepare your staff. Everyone has a role to play in a municipality's MS4 program, but that being said, everyone isn't expected to know everything about the program. Your staff is going to be expected to have knowledge about the MS4 program that's appropriate to their position. So the example that I have here is, your administrative staff in the office, they're not going to be asked about BMP maintenance, but they may be asked how they handle phone calls about citizen stormwater complaints. So the parts of the program that they would normally have interactions with on a day-to-day basis, that's what they're going to be asked about. And lastly, document, document, document. I've heard this comment from a couple of our inspectors that we've talked to, that when they go out and they're talking to public works staff or other municipal staff, the people at the municipality really know their MS4 program and can answer every question, but it's not always getting written down. So if you are investing in, investigating stormwater complaints, updating your stormwater infrastructure, implementing BMPs, doing public education outreach, make sure you're documenting all that work so it shows up so that you can get credit for that during your inspection. Because, there's always a lot of institutional knowledge, and we want to make sure that all of that is being documented. So last slide here is my contact information, my email. So if you have questions, you can email me directly. In most cases with inspections, I will probably refer you to the DEP regional offices. They're the ones the inspectors work out of, so I can answer general questions or big picture things. But if you have questions about your particular inspection, that probably needs to go to the regional office. So I also have the MS4 resource account that we check that daily. That's if you have a general MS4 question and you have no idea who asked it for, send it to that resource account and we will figure out who's the best person to answer that question. So that being said, I went through that pretty quickly, but I wanted to leave time for some questions. So if there's anybody who has any questions about preparing for an inspection or what to expect, please let me know.
So Jamie, we didn't have a moderator assigned to this, but we are seeing some questions in the chat. So if you can see those. The first one is, how is a DEP inspection scored?
So let's see. I'm looking to see who is in here. If I have, is Jake Rakowski in? I have a couple of the inspectors who have much more hands-on experience with this than I do. So if you're in the meeting, can you answer that question?
Sure. Yeah, this is Jake Rakowski with DEP's South Central office, for those that don't know me. And I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a score. It's not really a specific number. I'll walk through, have open discussions, kind of figure out where you guys are. And if there's things that we need to follow up on, we'll follow up on them and get them resolved. But more or less, it's not really a score. It's just more making sure that we're doing what needs to get done.
So that's a good point to make, because we really want to make sure that people are getting the most out of their MS4 programs. So the general attitude that most of our inspectors take is we want to be helpful, and if there's something lacking, if there's guidance that you need, we talk through that. And, we do have the option to issue a notice of violation. We really try not to let things get to that point. But, if you look at your permit and you are hitting what you need to do for those MCMs, if something's coming up that isn't meeting our expectation, the first step is just to talk to you and let you know what you need to be doing better. I see the next question there. Do you have an idea of the next MS4 inspections will happen through South Central? Yes, COVID is throwing a monkey wrench into everyone's plan. So I'm not sure what the scheduling is going to be, but Sean, if you would like to, Jake is going to be your inspector. So if you if you have Jake's email, send him an email or send me an email and I'll forward it to him and he can let you know. I see Latisse has similar question. Yes, with COVID, things have definitely been up in the air. But we'll, as soon as we know when we can get out there and start doing inspections again, we'll let everybody know.
Jamie, yeah, do you see the question? The next one is about MS4 inspections.
We have an MS4 inspection by EPA. Any idea why both DEP and EPA do separate inspections? Do we have anybody from EPA in the room here? Is Liz in here?
Yeah, I'm here, but I don't work in our compliance division. So I will say we do inspections because our enforcement group is also required to perform a certain number of inspections, different types, different states throughout the region. And it's for any, federally enforced NPDES permit. So that's why we would come to your to a municipality, and usually when we have an inspection, and again, I'm not an inspector, so I'm just kind of speaking off the cuff here. We usually invite the state to join us and do a joint inspection. So DEP has a requirement to perform their own. I'm sure they have, their compliance strategies as well, that they do a certain number of MS4 inspections, and we have that as well. So that's why there's two separate entities doing your inspections. But usually when we do an inspection, we always invite the state to join us in our inspections.
All right. Thank you for jumping in there to help me answer that, Liz.
Yeah.
I see. How often does DEP try to inspect permittees? We try to do once a permit term. And then, so once a permit term, and if there are some issues uncovered during your inspection, we may do a follow-up mini inspection after that, but generally once during the permit term. If a municipality going through an inspection is part of a joint PRP, does that make any difference for the inspection? It might. So you, I think you're referring to York County. So everybody in York County still has a separate permit. So there would be one inspection per municipality because you're all on separate permits. When it comes to looking at those BMP projects, if there's several municipalities that are kind of sharing in the same BMP and we just looked at it for the previous person, we may not be going, need to go see that BMP again for another municipality that's also sharing in the credit for that. But for most parts of the other two parts, the office inspection and the public works facility, municipally owned buildings, that stuff is going to be different. It just may be some of the BMPs might be different. I heard that a bill was introduced to Congress to extend the MS4 requirements cycle another 2 years due to COVID. I don't know status of that. Our next permit term, our next permit hasn't been written. It's something that DEP and EPA are currently discussing. If you have comments, what you want to see in the next permit, what you don't want to see, anything like that, feel free to email the resource account that I'm still sharing here. But right now it's nothing that we can comment on because we honestly don't know at this point.
Okay, we still have about a few minutes left in this session. Are there any more questions for Jamie? Feel free to put those in the chat or raise your hand and we can call on you to ask your question directly.
don't think there is. I don't see anybody typing.
Yeah, Jamie, I guess you got them all.
All right, like I said, my contact there is on the screen. So if anything does come up, feel free to send me an email. I get all kinds of random questions, so never be afraid to ask.